The church bells rang, signaling the start of her wedding. But Sarah wasn't in the church. She was running. Tears streamed down her face as she raced through the city streets in her white dress, the hem catching on the sidewalk. People stared. She didn't care. She had to get away. The life she was about to step into felt suffocating. A life she didn't want. A man she didn't love. She ran, not knowing where she was headed, until she slammed straight into him. Before we dive into the story, I need to know something. Have you ever found yourself running from something you couldn't explain? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one. And if you've ever had to make a decision that changed everything, hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss what happens next. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. Sarah's breath came in short, jagged bursts. Her heels clicked urgently on the pavement as she fled the church. The building, so grand and beautiful, had been her prison. But she wasn't running from her father's disapproving glare or the crowd's judgment. She was running from herself. Her whole life, she had been told what to do, where to go, and who to love. Her family's wealth had come with expectations. Marry for status, for power, for a future that had been planned for her before she was born. She'd never been asked what she wanted. Today, she was supposed to say, "I do" to Derek, a man who checked all the boxes but never made her heart race. She tried to convince herself that love would come later, that security and respect were enough to build a life on. But as she stood at the altar, looking at Derek's smug smile, all she could think was, "This is not my life." She couldn't go through with it. She couldn't. Sarah's phone buzzed in her pocket. It was her mother. "Where are you? You're about to make a huge mistake." She silenced it and shoved the phone back into her bag, the ringing only a faint echo of the life she was leaving behind. Her thoughts were racing as she turned a corner and found herself in an alley. Where am I going? A sharp inhale. A cold breeze cut through her, but it couldn't numb the raw panic gnawing at her chest. And then, out of nowhere, there he was. A man she didn't know, but a man who somehow felt like the answer to everything. He wasn't supposed to be here. Not in her life, not on this path. But as she crashed into his chest, the air was knocked from her lungs. She stumbled backward, almost falling. But he caught her, steady, calm, unlike the chaos she felt inside. "I'm sorry," she blurted, wiping her face with her sleeve. "I didn't mean to." He didn't say anything at first. He simply looked at her, his gaze piercing. His eyes were dark, but there was something in them that made her feel understood. It was a look she wasn't used to, one that didn't judge her for running, for being a mess. He was dressed in a black suit, more polished than anyone Sarah had ever seen. But there was something different about him, the kind of confidence that didn't need to be shouted. It just was. "I didn't mean to get in your way," she said, trying to regain her composure. "Clearly, you've been running." His voice was calm, almost too calm. There was a hint of amusement, but it wasn't mocking. He tilted his head slightly. "Why?" Sarah's eyes widened. She hadn't expected him to ask. She'd never been able to explain it to herself. How could she explain it to a stranger? But the question struck her deeper than she thought. She hesitated, the words getting stuck in her throat. "I was supposed to be getting married." She let out a shaky laugh. "But I couldn't. I wasn't ready for this." He didn't say anything. He just stood there, waiting. His stillness was like an invitation, like he wasn't judging her for running away, for not having everything figured out. Her heart was pounding. She needed to run again, but part of her didn't want to. Not yet. Finally, she met his gaze, her voice small but steady. "I don't know what I'm doing." He took a step closer. "Maybe you just need to stop running," he said softly. There was something in his voice, a weight that made her pause. Was it pity, concern, or something else? Something about the way he stood there, so sure of himself, made Sarah feel like maybe, just maybe, he could be the escape she needed. But could she trust a stranger? He held out his hand, his eyes never leaving hers. "What's your name?" Sarah looked down at his hand, her chest tight. Could she? She had spent so long running from her family, from her future, from what was expected of her. But this man, he didn't seem like anything she had ever known. For the first time in years, she felt like she had a choice. But was it a choice worth making? Her mind spun, and she felt a weight settle in her gut. Before she could make up her mind, he spoke again, his voice quieter this time. "Let me help you," he said, and in that moment, everything inside Sarah told her to run. But she didn't. Sarah stared at the stranger, his hand still extended in front of her, waiting for a response. It felt like everything in the world was on pause, the city's noise fading into the background. "Why are you helping me?" Her voice was barely above a whisper, as if asking the question would make her lose the little courage she had left. The man's gaze softened just a fraction, though his stance didn't shift. "Because you need it." It was the simplest answer, the most honest answer. But Sarah wasn't sure if she could believe it. She had spent her whole life being the daughter of a powerful family. People helped for a reason. They had their own motives. But he wasn't like that. There was no hidden agenda, no business deal behind his words. Felt real. And that scared her even more. For a moment, the only sound was the distant hum of traffic. Her heart was still racing, but she slowly placed her hand in his. His grip was firm, yet gentle. In that moment, she felt like maybe everything would be okay. Maybe. "I'm Sarah," she said, pulling herself together. "And you are?" "Carter," he answered simply. They walked in silence for a while, side by side, the world around them moving at its usual pace. She could feel his presence next to her, steady, reassuring, as though he was holding something together inside her that had been fraying for years. Her mind was still foggy. She had just left her wedding, for God's sake. But there was something about Carter that made her feel lighter, like she wasn't just running away from something, but maybe, just maybe, running towards something she'd been too afraid to face. They reached a coffee shop, a cozy little place tucked into the corner of a quiet street. Carter opened the door for her, and she stepped inside, the warmth of the place immediately enveloping her. "Would you like something?" Carter asked, his voice soft but direct. It felt almost normal, like this was just any other moment in life. She wasn't running away from her father's expectations. She wasn't running away from a marriage that wasn't hers. She was just being. For the first time in a long time, it felt good. "Just a coffee, please," Sarah replied, taking a seat at one of the small tables near the window. Carter nodded and went up to the counter, leaving her alone for a moment. Sarah let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. She felt like she was on the edge of something big, something different. She had no idea what Carter wanted from her, but right now, she didn't care. She just needed to figure out where she was supposed to go from here. She looked out the window, watching as people went about their lives. They all seemed so sure of themselves. People like her, people with families, careers, responsibilities. But Sarah didn't feel like one of them anymore. Not after what she had just walked away from. Her phone buzzed in her purse, dragging her back to reality. It was her father's name flashing on the screen. She ignored it. The last thing she wanted to do was talk to him right now. She had to breathe. She had to think. She looked up as Carter returned with their drinks, setting one down in front of her. "Thanks," she said softly, finally breaking the silence. He sat down across from her, his eyes scanning her face with a quiet intensity. "You okay?" She took a sip of her coffee, the warm liquid soothing her throat, though it didn't do much to calm the storm inside her. "I don't know," she admitted. "I feel like I just made the biggest mistake of my life." Carter didn't respond immediately. He just sat there watching her, as if he could see through the layers of her carefully built defenses. It wasn't uncomfortable, though. For the first time in ages, Sarah felt like someone actually saw her. Not the perfect daughter or the future wife of a powerful businessman. Just her. "I can't imagine what that must feel like," he said quietly. "To run away from something so huge." Sarah took another sip of her coffee, trying to avoid his eyes. She didn't want to admit it, didn't want to feel vulnerable. But his words hit her deeper than she expected. "I don't even know what I'm running toward," she whispered. I just know I couldn't do it. I couldn't marry him. And you think that makes you weak? Carter's voice was calm but edged with something else. Something Sarah couldn't quite place. She shook her head, looking down at the table. I don't know. It just feels wrong. Like I'm breaking everything that's been planned for me. Carter leaned forward slightly, his gaze never leaving her face. Maybe it's not about what's planned for you. Maybe it's about what you want. Her heart skipped a beat. What do I want? The question hit her harder than she expected. It was a question she had never asked herself. She had always been told what she should want, what she should feel, what was expected of her. I don't know what I want, Sarah said quietly, but I'm terrified that I'll regret this decision for the rest of my life. Carter sat back in his chair, his eyes thoughtful. Regret is part of life, but running from your own heart, that's a different kind of regret. Trust me. She looked at him, wondering how he could be so sure, so certain of himself. He was just a stranger, but for some reason she wanted to trust him. I think I need to stop running. Sarah's voice was barely a whisper, but the words felt like a promise. Carter didn't say anything. He just nodded, his expression unreadable. And in that moment, something shifted. The weight that had been crushing her chest felt just a little bit lighter. The next few days passed in a blur for Sarah. The city outside her small apartment felt distant, almost irrelevant. She had left her wedding, fled from the life her parents had meticulously planned for her, and now she was here, alone. Or at least that's how it felt. Carter had kept his word. He checked in with her a few times, sending simple texts, making sure she was okay. But each message only seemed to remind her of what she had left behind. Every time her phone buzzed with his name, her stomach would tighten. He was kind, too kind, and that made her feel uncomfortable. What did he want from me? She'd never let herself rely on anyone before. She wasn't used to opening up, to letting people in. She had always been the one who was there for everyone else. But now, when she was the one who needed support, she didn't know how to accept it. It wasn't that she didn't want to. She was just terrified of what it might mean. She thought about her father, about her mother, about her fiancé, Thomas. She couldn't imagine what they would think if they knew what she'd done. They'd call her reckless, impulsive. Maybe they're right. And then there was Carter. He wasn't like the men she'd grown up with, the ones with too much money and power. He wasn't a part of her world. His life was different, simpler. But somehow, he understood her in ways no one else had. That scared her too. She sat on the couch in her apartment, staring at the blank wall in front of her. Her heart was tangled in knots. She had made a decision, run away. But now all she could do was hide from it, from the truth of it. The phone rang, breaking her thoughts. It was her mother. Sarah, where are you? Her mother's voice was sharp, almost frantic. Your father's been trying to reach you. Your wedding is in ruins. You can't just disappear like this. Sarah's throat tightened. She'd been avoiding their calls for days. She had no words for them, no excuses. What could she say? That she didn't want to marry Thomas? That she wasn't ready for the life they had set out for her? That she wanted something more than what had been handed to her? I can't talk right now, Mom. Sarah's voice was weak, even to her own ears. I'll call you back later. No, Sarah, you don't get to just. She ended the call. The silence in the room felt deafening. She wasn't ready to face them, not yet. She needed time, space, to figure out what she wanted. And right now, the only person who seemed to get that was Carter. She pulled out her phone and stared at his most recent text. Hey, just checking in. I hope you're okay. You don't have to respond if you don't want to, but I'm here if you need to talk. She felt a pang in her chest. She should respond. She wanted to respond. But what could she say? What do I even need right now? She stood up, pacing the small apartment. Everything in her life felt like it was in chaos. She wasn't sure how to move forward. She wasn't sure what she wanted, or even who she was anymore. A knock on the door startled her, and she froze. For a moment, she thought it was her parents, but it was too soon. The knock came again, more urgent this time. She walked cautiously toward the door, peering through the peephole. It was Carter. Her heart skipped a beat. She hadn't been expecting him. He had sent a text earlier in the day, but she hadn't replied. The last thing she wanted was to confront whatever it was they had been dancing around. But here he was, standing in front of her door. She opened it slowly, unsure of what to say. "Carter, what? Can we talk?" His voice was steady, but there was a quiet urgency behind it. He looked at her with those deep, searching eyes, as if he could see right through her. Sarah stepped aside without thinking, and Carter entered the apartment. The moment he crossed the threshold, Sarah felt like the room had grown smaller. Everything around her felt too close, too overwhelming. She hadn't planned for this. She hadn't planned to feel anything, especially not right now. "I know you're confused," Carter said as he looked around the apartment. He didn't sit, just stood there, his hands shoved in his pockets. "And I get it, but you can't keep hiding from everything, Sarah. It's not gonna fix itself." His words hit her like a punch to the gut. She wasn't ready for him to be so direct, so honest. She wanted to tell him to leave, to go away and leave her to figure it out on her own. But she didn't. Instead, she just stood there, silently. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do," she said, her voice barely audible. "I don't know how to fix this." "You don't need to fix it," Carter replied, taking a step closer. "You need to live it, to face it, to be who you are, not who they want you to be." His words felt like they cut through her carefully built walls. She had spent so long pretending, so long hiding behind the roles her family and society had set for her. And now Carter was standing here asking her to just be. But how? How could she just be when everything was in pieces? She looked up at him, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "What if I make the wrong choice?" Her voice shook. Carter's expression softened. "We all do. But the worst thing you can do is never choose at all." And for the first time in a long time, Sarah realized something. She didn't have to have it all figured out. She just had to take the first step. The next morning, Sarah woke to a knock on her door. She was still tangled in blankets, exhausted from the restless night. The apartment was quiet, the only sound being the low hum of the city outside. She rubbed her eyes and stumbled out of bed, still half in a daze. Who could be knocking so early? When she opened the door, Carter stood there, holding a coffee in each hand. His eyes were steady, his usual calm demeanor now tinged with a hint of something else, determination. "Coffee?" He offered one of the cups to her. She blinked, still processing the fact that he was standing there. "You didn't have to come," Sarah said, her voice unsure. "I didn't. I know," he interrupted gently. "But I figured if you're not going to come out and face it, I'll just have to bring it to you." She hesitated but took the cup from him. The warmth of the coffee seeped into her fingers, grounding her in a way she hadn't expected. They stood there for a moment, both quiet, as if waiting for the other to speak first. But neither did. The silence stretched, and Sarah felt an uncomfortable tension in the air. There was so much she still didn't understand, so much she hadn't said. But Carter, standing right in front of her, wasn't pushing her. He was just waiting. "Why are you doing this?" Sarah finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why are you trying to help me?" Carter took a slow breath, as if considering his words. He didn't look away, his gaze fixed on her with a quiet intensity that made her chest tighten. "Because you're worth it," he said simply. "I don't know what's going on in your head, but I do know you don't have to go through it alone. And if you need help, I'm here." She looked at him, his words hanging in the air. "You're worth it." No one had ever said something like that to her, not in this way. Sure, people had told her they cared, but it always came with strings attached, with expectations. But Carter wasn't asking for anything. He was just offering his support. She felt a pang in her chest. "I don't know if I can do this, Carter," Sarah said, her voice cracking a little. "I don't know how to fix everything. I don't even know what I'm supposed to do anymore." "You don't have to fix anything," Carter replied, his voice steady. "Just take it one step at a time. You don't have to know the whole picture right now. You just need to know what you want in this moment. And I'm not going anywhere until you figure it out." His words, simple and direct, cut through the noise in her mind. There was no grand plan, no pressure to make everything right. Just one step at a time. Sarah's gaze dropped to the coffee cup in her hands. She could feel the weight of her own decisions, the ones she had avoided, the ones she hadn't wanted to face. Was this what she wanted? The weight of Carter's presence was impossible to ignore. His quiet confidence and patience were a stark contrast to the chaos swirling inside her. She couldn't remember the last time anyone had been so steady. The doorframe between them felt like a wall she couldn't quite break through. And yet, as she looked at him, she felt something shift. Something small but powerful. I can't stay here much longer, Carter," Sarah finally said, looking up at him. "But I can't go back either." "I know," Carter said quietly. "You don't have to make a decision right this second. But when you're ready, I'm here." His words were simple, but they carried a weight that Sarah hadn't expected. He wasn't pushing her. He wasn't asking her to choose now. He was just giving her the space she needed. And somehow that made all the difference. As Carter turned to leave, Sarah stood there, holding her coffee and watching him walk away. Her heart pounded in her chest. She had never felt so conflicted, so uncertain. But as she stood in the doorway, she realized that for the first time in a long time, she wasn't alone. And for the first time, she wasn't sure what was next. But maybe, just maybe, that was okay. The days after Carter's visit passed in a blur for Sarah. She didn't know what to expect from him, and she didn't know what to expect from herself either. Each morning, she would wake up, put on a smile, and go through the motions of her daily routine. But it all felt hollow. At work, she would sit in her office, pretending to focus on emails and meetings. But the only thing her mind kept circling back to was that moment on her doorstep with Carter. The way he looked at her, like he truly believed in her. And the way his presence had settled something deep inside her. A sense of peace, of safety, she hadn't known she was missing. But still, Sarah resisted. She pushed those feelings aside, buried them beneath the weight of everything else she had to deal with. She was not ready for any of this. That night, Sarah stood in her kitchen, reheating leftovers. The house was quiet. She hadn't heard from Carter since he left that morning, and part of her felt relieved. He had been so kind, but she wasn't ready to let anyone get close, not after everything she'd been through. Her ex-husband's betrayal still stung. The lies, the broken promises. It all felt like it happened yesterday. Her phone buzzed. She picked it up without thinking, expecting it to be a work email or a notification. But instead, it was a message from Carter. "How are you doing?" Sarah stared at the message for a moment. Simple, honest, caring. But was she ready for this? Was she ready to let him in, to stop running? She let out a slow breath and typed back, "I don't know." The message lingered there, unsent, as she stared at the screen, unsure of her own answer. A part of her wanted to push him away, to tell him it wasn't his problem, that she didn't need his help. But another part felt like she had already started letting him in, even though she wasn't ready to admit it yet. The next few moments felt like eternity. But then her phone buzzed again. "It's okay to not know. I'm here whenever you're ready. Just take your time." She let out a shaky breath. She never thought anyone would be this patient with her. But maybe that was the problem. She wasn't used to someone being so steady, so kind, so real. For the first time in months, Sarah felt like she could breathe. The phone buzzed once more. "We're in this together." A rush of emotion washed over her. That simple sentence made her realize something she'd been avoiding for so long. Maybe it was time to stop running. Maybe it was time to stop hiding from the possibility of something more. But the fear was still there, gnawing at her insides. It wasn't just about letting Carter in. It was about accepting that she could have something good again, that she could have a chance at happiness. The next day, she found herself standing outside the office building, feeling the crisp air of early morning against her skin. The city bustled around her, and for a moment, she felt disconnected from it all, lost in the noise. Her phone buzzed once more. It was Carter. "You okay?" Sarah didn't answer right away. Her thoughts were tangled, and her heart was torn between pushing him away and letting him in. She felt stuck. And then, without thinking, she hit reply. I'm trying. I'm really trying. As soon as she sent the message, she felt a wave of vulnerability crash over her. Had she made the right choice? She didn't know. She didn't have the answers, and that was terrifying. But as she stood there, the phone buzzing in her hand, a quiet thought surfaced in her mind. Maybe it's okay not to have all the answers. Maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to fix everything herself. Maybe she could lean on someone. For the first time in what felt like forever, Sarah felt the weight of her own fears starting to lift. She wasn't alone anymore. Carter had offered her something she hadn't expected. Understanding. Patience. But was she ready to let herself be loved again? As Sarah walked into her office, her thoughts consumed her. It was becoming clear that she couldn't keep pretending anymore. The walls she'd built around her heart were starting to crumble. And though she was scared, she realized that it wasn't just Carter she was afraid of. It was herself. Could she allow herself to take a chance on love again? Sarah sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the phone in her hands. The screen was blank. She had opened Carter's message an hour ago, but she hadn't been able to respond. I'm here whenever you're ready. That's all he had said. It felt like the simplest sentence, but the weight of it had settled over her like a heavy blanket. She wasn't sure if she was ready to open up. Not to him, not to anyone. She hadn't been ready before, and she didn't think she was ready now. But everything about him, it made her wonder if she could be. He wasn't like the others. He didn't come with strings attached. No hidden agendas. No games. He was just there. And it terrified her. Sarah had spent so long running, pretending to be fine, convincing herself that being alone was safer. But now, the truth kept whispering at the back of her mind. You don't have to do this alone. The clock ticked on, the minutes slipping by as she sat in the silence of her apartment, the hum of the city outside a distant backdrop to the whirlwind in her chest. Finally, she couldn't take it anymore. She stood up, pacing the room. It wasn't just Carter she was avoiding. It was everything. Everything she had built up in her mind about what she deserved, what she could handle. She took a deep breath, staring at the phone again. She could send him a message. She could tell him how she was feeling, but it felt so vulnerable. To say it out loud, I'm scared, was something she hadn't done in a long time. The weight of her fears, her past, held her back. But there was something about the way Carter made her feel, something about how patient he was with her, that made her want to reach out. She sat back down and typed, I don't know if I'm ready. She stared at the message, her thumb hovering over the send button. Her heart pounded in her chest, as if it was deciding for her. And then, almost as if he had been waiting for it, Carter's name appeared at the top of her screen. His message was simple, like always. Take your time. But whenever you are ready, I'm here. No pressure. No rush. The relief was immediate. She felt her shoulders relax, the tension in her muscles melting away. But even with the relief, the uncertainty lingered. The truth was, she wasn't ready to open her heart again. She wasn't ready to trust anyone like that. And yet, there was something about Carter that made her question everything she had believed. Maybe it wasn't about being ready. Maybe it was about taking a step forward, even if she wasn't sure of the ground beneath her feet. She sent the message, finally, her finger trembling slightly as she pressed send. Thank you for being patient. Later that evening, Sarah found herself walking through the park near her apartment. The soft hum of city lights surrounded her, but she felt strangely alone in the crowd. The night was cool, and a light breeze stirred the leaves of the trees overhead. She pulled her jacket tighter around her, her thoughts a swirling mess. She needed to get out of her head. She needed to stop thinking so much. But when she reached a quiet bench near the center of the park, she found herself sitting down, her mind drifting back to that moment with Carter. The way he had looked at her, like she was worthy of something more, something better. For a moment, Sarah allowed herself to imagine what it would be like. To not be so afraid, to trust someone again. The world around her felt still, like everything was holding its breath. The phone buzzed again. It was Carter. His message was short, but it hit her with a force she hadn't expected. "I just want you to know. I think you're amazing, Sarah." She stared at the words, feeling them hit her deeper than she cared to admit. She had always told herself she didn't need validation, but somehow, this felt different. She didn't know why. Her heart raced as she typed back, "I'm trying to believe that." Her finger hovered over the send button again. Trying. It was a start. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough for now. The breeze picked up, rustling the trees around her, and for the first time in a long time, Sarah felt like she could breathe. She wasn't sure if she was ready for what came next, but she wasn't running anymore. Maybe that was the first step toward something real, toward something better. As Sarah sat there, looking at the phone in her hand, the uncertainty of the moment still hung in the air. But there was something else too. Something new. Hope. The kind of hope that comes when you start believing in someone else, when you begin to see the possibility of something more. And as the city lights flickered in the distance, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that maybe, just maybe, her life was about to change in a way she never expected. The next day felt different. Sarah woke up with a strange sense of anticipation. It wasn't the usual dread she had come to expect after a restless night. Instead, there was a spark of something unfamiliar, a quiet but steady pull, the feeling of possibility. She had spent most of the night thinking about Carter's messages, about what he had said, and what that could mean for her. And the more she thought, the more she realized she couldn't keep pretending that she wasn't feeling something. Her life was supposed to be about survival, not risk. She had built walls so high over the years that she had forgotten what it felt like to let someone in. But Carter was different. He had seen past all the walls she had put up, past the cold exterior, and he wasn't afraid of what he saw. In the quiet of her small apartment, Sarah stood up and walked to the window, the sunlight spilling into the room, casting soft shadows across the floor. She had gotten so used to the silence, to being alone, but now, with Carter's presence in her life, it felt different. Was she ready to break free from the shell she had built around herself? The phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. She grabbed it almost instinctively. "Can we meet today?" It was Carter's message. Simple, to the point, no pressure. Sarah stared at the words, the weight of them sitting heavily on her chest. She hadn't agreed to meet him in person yet, hadn't told him how much she had been struggling with everything. Her past, her fears, the walls around her heart. Could she even let someone like him close? But she already knew the answer. She wanted to. She hadn't realized how much she wanted to meet him until now. That afternoon, Sarah sat in her car, the engine idling in front of the coffee shop where they had planned to meet. She couldn't seem to get her hands to stop trembling, her thoughts racing ahead of her. What if this was a mistake? What if she wasn't ready for what he was offering? What if she ruined everything by letting him see the real her? She took a deep breath. No turning back now. When she stepped inside, the warmth of the coffee shop hit her immediately, the rich scent of brewing coffee filling the air. It felt like a different world, a world where everything wasn't so hard to navigate, the kind of place where you could just be yourself even for a moment. And then there he was. Carter sat at the corner table, a cup of coffee in his hands, his eyes focused on something on his phone. He looked up as she approached, and the soft smile that spread across his face made Sarah's heart skip a beat. She felt her own lips twitch into a smile, despite her nerves. "You made it," he said, his voice low and calm. There was no judgment, no expectation in his tone, just warmth. "Yeah," Sarah replied, sliding into the seat across from him. "I almost didn't." Carter set his coffee down and leaned back, studying her with an intensity that both unnerved and comforted her at the same time. He wasn't pushing her to talk, wasn't demanding she open up, but his presence felt like an invitation. The silence stretched between them for a moment, comfortable but heavy with unspoken words. "So," Carter said, breaking the silence, "how are you doing, really?" Sarah met his gaze, her heart pounding. It was the question she'd been avoiding for weeks. But somehow, hearing him ask it made her feel like maybe it was time to be honest. At least a little. "I'm not sure yet," she said quietly, the words coming easier than she expected. I've spent so long keeping everyone at arm's length. I forgot what it was like to feel anything. There. It was out in the open. Carter didn't respond immediately, just let the words hang in the air. It felt like the room had gotten a little quieter, as though everyone else had faded away. After a moment, Carter nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. I get it, he said, his voice soft. It's hard to let someone in when you've been burned before. He reached across the table, his hand just hovering over hers. But I'm not here to hurt you. I'm not going anywhere unless you want me to. The sincerity in his voice hit Sarah harder than she expected. She swallowed, fighting the lump in her throat. What if he was right? What if she had been running away from something that could actually heal her? There was no immediate answer, no sudden epiphany, but for the first time in a long while, Sarah felt the tiniest flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, she could let herself trust again. She leaned forward slightly, her eyes meeting his. I'm not sure what's next, she admitted, but I want to see where this goes. I can't promise anything, but I'm willing to try. Carter's smile widened, and for the first time, Sarah saw the warmth in his eyes that made her feel like she could actually believe in this. I'm not asking for promises, he said softly. Just your time. That's all I need. And in that moment, as she looked at him, the weight of all her fears didn't seem as heavy. Maybe it wouldn't be easy. Maybe it wouldn't be perfect. But for the first time, she felt like she was no longer facing it alone. As Sarah sat there, feeling the warmth of Carter's words settle in her heart, she realized that she had made the first real step. And even though she still didn't have all the answers, she didn't need them just yet. She would go where the road took her because maybe the road, for once, led somewhere worth traveling. The sun had barely set when Sarah walked out onto the small balcony of her apartment, the evening breeze gently lifting her hair. She stared out at the city below, the familiar hum of life moving on in its usual rhythm. But tonight it felt different. Tonight, something had changed inside her. Her thoughts drifted back to that night, months ago, when she had fled her wedding, her heart weighed down by doubt, fear, and uncertainty. She had run to escape the life she thought she was supposed to live, and in doing so, she had unknowingly run into the arms of someone who would change everything. Carter, the man who had shown her that love didn't need to be perfect to be real. The man who had listened to her fears, her dreams, her struggles, and had never once turned away. He wasn't afraid of her past. He embraced it, and, for the first time, Sarah felt like she could breathe. She was no longer that woman lost in the chaos, running away from her own heart. She had come to understand that her heart was not something to fear but something to embrace. And Carter, he was the one she could share it with. She heard a knock on her door, breaking her from her thoughts. A small smile tugged at her lips before she made her way inside, heart pounding with anticipation. As she opened the door, Carter stood there, his expression warm but serious, the evening light casting a soft glow around him. Hey, he said softly. Can we talk? Sarah nodded, stepping aside to let him in. She didn't need to ask what this was about. Deep down, she already knew. There was no denying it now. They were both standing on the edge of something real, something undeniable. Carter paused in the middle of the living room, looking around as if taking everything in. But his gaze never left her. I've been thinking, he started, his voice steady but full of emotion, about us, about what we're building together. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. The words felt like they had been lingering between them for a while now, and she had been waiting for this moment, waiting for the chance to truly let go of the fear that had once kept her guarded. I'm scared, Sarah said before she could stop herself, her voice barely above a whisper. The vulnerability felt raw, but it was the truth. I've been burned before, and I've been running from love for so long. I guess I'm just afraid of failing again. Carter stepped closer, his hand reaching for hers. I don't want you to be afraid. Not with me. I know we're both coming from different places, but I'm not asking for perfection. I'm asking for us to give this a chance. Sarah swallowed hard, the weight of his words settling in. The uncertainty of the future still lingered, but it wasn't as overwhelming as it used to be. It was possible. They were possible. I'm not asking for you to be anything you're not, Carter continued. I just want to be with you, Sarah. To see where this goes, to see us. Her chest tightened, emotions swirling within her. Felt so simple, yet so profound. Here was a man who wasn't asking her to change or to be someone she wasn't. He was just asking her to trust him. And that felt like the most beautiful thing in the world. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she blinked them away quickly. I want to, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I want to trust you. I want to believe in this. Carter's expression softened, a smile tugging at his lips as he gently wiped a tear from her cheek. Then let's do it together. The next few weeks passed in a blur of joy, laughter, and moments that Sarah could never have imagined when she had first walked away from her wedding. She and Carter spent more time together than ever, taking spontaneous trips, cooking dinners together, and even watching old movies on the couch while their son played nearby. For the first time, Sarah felt like she was not just surviving, but truly living. And as they sat in the park one evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon, Sarah realized that she had fallen in love with him. Really, truly fallen in love. But it wasn't just the love she had feared, the kind that felt like a trap. This was different. This love was freeing. It was a love that said, I see you, all of you, and I choose you, not despite your flaws, but because of them. I'm glad you didn't give up on us, she said, looking over at Carter. Carter chuckled softly, squeezing her hand. I'm glad you didn't give up on yourself. She smiled, the warmth of his words filling her chest. It wasn't perfect. It would never be perfect. But it was real, and that was enough. Sarah stood at the window of her apartment one evening, watching the city lights blink on, her son tucked into bed. She glanced at the phone in her hand, the message she had just received from Carter making her heart race. I love you, more than I can say. She felt a smile spread across her face. There it was again, the raw, simple truth. Love, in its truest form, had found her when she least expected it. It had found her not in some grand gesture, but in the quiet moments of honesty and vulnerability. And now, she was ready to step into the future with Carter by her side. No more running, no more hiding. They had both carried their scars for so long, but they had found healing in each other. As she looked out over the city, she knew that, for the first time in her life, she wasn't just living. She was alive. And in that moment, she could finally say, she was home. As Sarah sat there, feeling the weight of Carter's words wrap around her heart, a thought crossed her mind. A thought she hadn't dared to entertain until now. What if this was it? What if this was the beginning of everything she had been searching for? Her phone buzzed again. Another message from Carter. I'm here. Always. And as the last words of the message settled into her heart, Sarah couldn't help but wonder, what if love was meant to be this simple? Sarah stood at the window, her fingers lightly tracing the cool glass. The city was alive outside, but tonight, she felt a stillness inside her. Not the kind of stillness that was lonely or empty, but a peaceful one. It was the kind of stillness that said, I'm exactly where I'm meant to be. For the first time in so long, she didn't have to chase after something. She didn't need to prove anything or run from her past. She simply had to be. And Carter was right there beside her, steady and unwavering. A love that, for all its messiness, felt like home. The door to the living room creaked open. Sarah turned just as Carter entered, his presence filling the room. She smiled, her heart lifting as she took in the sight of him, the man who had stood by her side, never once asking her to change. He had never expected her to have all the answers. He had simply loved her for who she was, flaws and all. Hey, he said, his voice a soft murmur. He crossed the room, his eyes searching hers, reading her as though she were an open book. And for the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid to be read. Hey, she whispered back, her heart pounding in her chest. He took her hand, gently pulling her toward him. I was thinking, he began, his words slow and deliberate. I don't want to rush anything, but I know what I want. And it's you. It's always been you. A tremor ran through her as the truth of his words sank in. Sarah had known this all along, but hearing him say it, seeing it in his eyes, it made everything real. It was like the final piece of a puzzle falling perfectly into place. "I'm not perfect," she said quietly, her voice cracking with emotion. "I don't have it all figured out, and I might still have fears, doubts. But I know that with you I'm not afraid anymore. I'm ready to try, to be with you." Carter's smile was a mixture of relief and joy. He cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle but firm. "That's all I need. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be you. And I want you, Sarah." In that moment, the world seemed to fade away. It was just them, standing in the quiet of the evening, hearts laid bare. No more walls, no more pretenses. They had both come so far, from brokenness to healing, from doubt to trust. And now, here they were, a new beginning, one that was built on the foundation of love, truth, and patience. It wasn't easy, and it hadn't been perfect, but it was theirs. And that was enough. Sarah stepped closer to him, resting her head against his chest. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her tightly, as though trying to protect her from the world. And for the first time, she allowed herself to fully surrender to the love that had found her. "Can we really make this work?" she asked, her voice a whisper. Carter kissed the top of her head. "We already are." Her heart fluttered in her chest. "We already are." Those words were more than enough. Weeks passed, and life continued in its rhythm. The days were filled with laughter, quiet dinners, and moments of warmth. But in every ordinary moment, Sarah found herself falling deeper and deeper into Carter's love. And soon enough, those quiet moments turned into something more. A promise, a commitment. As they stood together, watching their son play outside, it wasn't just the two of them anymore. It was a family, bound by love and a new hope for the future. One evening, as they sat together on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of pink and orange, Carter turned to Sarah, his eyes full of something deeper now, something unspoken but understood. "Sarah," he said, his voice low, "I want to ask you something." She looked at him, her heart skipping a beat. "What is it?" Carter reached for her hand, his thumb tracing the soft lines of her skin. "Will you marry me?" Sarah's breath caught in her throat, and her chest tightened. She hadn't expected this. Not so soon, at least. But looking at him now, feeling the weight of everything they'd been through, everything they'd shared, she knew the answer. "Yes," she whispered, tears springing to her eyes. "Yes, I'll marry you." And in that moment, Sarah realized something. She wasn't running anymore. She wasn't looking over her shoulder, second-guessing every decision. She wasn't waiting for love to disappoint her. She had found the one person who understood her, who accepted her for all that she was, and she was ready to walk into the future with him, hand in hand. The day they got married was everything Sarah had once dreamed of, but never believed was possible. It wasn't extravagant or flashy. It was simple. It was real. It was theirs. Surrounded by the people they loved, they exchanged vows. Not perfect promises, but promises that would be tested and held firm by the strength of their love. As Sarah kissed Carter beneath the warm, golden sun, she knew she had found something extraordinary. Not in the perfection of a fairy tale, but in the messy, beautiful reality of love that came when she least expected it. Love had found her, and she had never felt more alive. And so, Sarah and Carter's story continued. They were far from perfect, and life would undoubtedly throw its challenges at them. But as they built their life together, they knew one thing for sure. The love they had found would always be enough. Because in the end, it's not about the fairy tale. It's about finding someone who sees you, loves you, and chooses you, no matter the scars, the flaws, or the fears. And maybe, just maybe, that's all we really need. Have you ever been afraid to love, but found someone who helped you take that leap? Let us know in the comments. And drop a heart if you believe in second chances at love. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.